The artificial gravity hummed beneath Marcus Chen's boots as he walked through the lower decks of Station Kepler 7. 20 years of military service had left him with a slight limp and scars that ran deeper than flesh, but his eyes still swept every corridor with the practiced awareness of a soldier who had seen too much. The war with the hegemony had ended 5 years ago, but old habits died hard. Marcus pulled his worn jacket tighter as he navigated the maze of maintenance tunnels that served as his route to the recycling center. The station's upper levels buzzed with diplomatic activity as dozens of alien species conducted trade negotiations. But down here in the bowels of the structure, only the forgotten and unwanted made their homes. Former soldiers, refugees, and those who had fallen through the cracks of galactic society found shelter in the abandoned sections. The recycling center paid decent credits for sorted materials, and Marcus had developed a system over the past 6 months. Wake at 0600, sort through the refuse from the diplomatic quarters, deliver the valuable materials, collect payment, and try not to think about how far he had fallen from his days as a decorated Marine Corps captain. As he rounded a corner near the old cargo bay, a sound made him freeze. It was barely audible over the station's mechanical hum, but his trained ears caught it immediately. A whimper, soft, frightened, and undeniably young. Marcus pressed himself against the bulkhead and listened. There it was again, coming from behind a stack of decommissioned shipping containers. His hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm used to rest, finding only empty space. Civilians weren't allowed weapons on the station, a rule that chafed against every instinct he had developed during the war. Moving silently despite his limp, Marcus crept toward the sound. Between 2 containers, he glimpsed something that made his breath catch. A small figure huddled in the shadows, no bigger than a human child of maybe 6 or 7 years old. But this was no human child. The creature had scales that shifted between deep green and gold in the dim lighting, and a long tail that wrapped protectively around its small body. Its face was distinctly draconic, with large eyes that held an intelligence far beyond its apparent age. This was a Draknari youngling, one of the rarest sights in the galaxy. The Draknari were an ancient race, proud and powerful, known for their incredible longevity and fierce protection of their young. Their homeworld of Pyraxis lay deep in hegemony territory, and most humans had never seen one outside of wartime combat footage. They were natural shapeshifters, capable of taking humanoid forms, but this little one seemed too young or too frightened to maintain such a disguise. As Marcus watched, the youngling looked up with eyes that held a depth of terror that no child should ever experience. Its small body was covered in dirt and what looked like dry blood, though whether it was injured or the blood belonged to someone else, Marcus couldn't tell. The creature saw him and let out a small squeak of fear, pressing itself further back into the narrow space between the containers. Marcus raised his hands slowly, showing his palms in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle tone he had once used with his own daughter before the war had taken everything from him. "I'm not going to hurt you." The youngling's eyes darted between Marcus and the exit, clearly calculating whether it could make a run for it. Its breathing was rapid and shallow, the kind of hyperventilation that came from prolonged terror. Marcus slowly lowered himself to one knee, making himself less threatening. "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" At the mention of parents, the youngling's composure finally cracked. Tears began streaming down its scaled cheeks as it let out a sound that was part whimper, part keen of grief. The sound hit Marcus like a physical blow, dredging up memories of his own loss. "They're gone, aren't they?" Marcus asked gently. The youngling nodded, then surprised him by speaking in heavily accented standard. "Mommy, I need you." The words came out as barely more than a whisper, but they carried a weight that seemed to compress the air around them. Marcus felt his throat tighten. During the war, he had seen too many orphans, both human and alien. But Something about this little one's plight struck him with unusual force. Perhaps it was the way the creature had called out for its mother in the same tone his own daughter had used during nightmares. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Zura," the youngling replied, wiping her nose with the back of a scaled hand. "Mama call me Zura. That's a beautiful name. I'm Marcus." He gestured to himself. "Are you hungry, Zura?" The youngling's stomach answered for her with a loud rumble that echoed off the container walls. Marcus couldn't help but smile slightly at the very universal response of a hungry child, regardless of species. "Come on," Marcus said, standing slowly. "Let's get you something to eat." Zara shook her head vigorously. "No, umans urdraguns." Mama said. She dissolved into tears again. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. The war had poisoned relationships between many species, and the Draknari had indeed fought alongside the hegemony against human forces. But this was a child, and children were innocent regardless of the sins of their elders. "Not all humans hurt dragons," Marcus said carefully, "and I give you my word as a soldier that I will not harm you. But you can't stay here alone. When did you last eat?" Zara held up 3 small fingers, then seemed to reconsider and held up a 4th. "For days." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. A Draknari youngling could survive longer than a human child without food, but 4 days was pushing the limits even for their hardy species. "Please," Marcus said, extending his hand palm up. "Let me help you. I know what it's like to lose family." Something in his tone seemed to reach her. Zara looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out with one clawed finger and touched his palm. Her scales were warm, almost feverish. "You're sick," Marcus observed. "Hungry," Zara corrected. "And scared. The bad men, they took Mama and Papa. They said dragons were worth lots of money." Her young voice carried a matter-of-fact tone that somehow made the horror of her words even worse. "Slavers." Marcus felt his jaw clench. The Galactic treaties banned slavery in all its forms, but enforcement was spotty in the outer systems. Draknari, with their long lifespans and valuable abilities, were prime targets for illegal trafficking operations. "Did you escape?" Marcus asked. Zara nodded. "Mama made me promise to run if the bad men came. She said find good humans who would help." Her large eyes fixed on Marcus with desperate hope. "Are you a good human?" The question hit Marcus harder than any enemy weapon ever had. Was he a good human? He had done terrible things during the war, made decisions that haunted his dreams. He had failed to save his own family when raiders had attacked his colony world. What made him think he could save this lost little dragon? But, looking into Zara's eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't walk away. Whatever he had been, whatever he had done, this moment offered a chance at redemption. "I'm going to try to be," Marcus said honestly. "Will you let me help you?" After a moment that seemed to stretch forever, Zara slowly emerged from her hiding place. She was even smaller than he had thought, probably barely reaching his waist if she stood straight. Her scales were dulled with malnutrition and stress, and she moved with the careful gait of someone trying not to show pain. "Can you walk to my quarters?" Marcus asked. Zara nodded, then surprised him by shifting form. The change was fluid and beautiful, her draconic features melting away to reveal a small human girl with golden hair and green eyes. Only the faint shimmer around her edges betrayed her true nature. "Safer this way," she explained in her child's voice. "People don't hunt human children." The casual pragmatism of her statement broke Marcus's heart. This little one had learned harsh lessons about survival that no child should know. They made their way through the station's lower levels, Marcus matching his pace to Zara's shorter stride. She stayed close to his side, occasionally reaching out to touch his arm as if reassuring herself that he was still there. Marcus's quarters were in a section of the station that had been converted from crew berths into low-income housing. The space was small but clean, with a fold-down bunk, a tiny food preparation area, and a shared bathroom down the hall. It wasn't much, but it was home. Zara's disguise wavered as soon as the door closed behind them, revealing her true form again. She looked around the sparse room with wide eyes. "Hungry," she said simply. Marcus opened his small food storage unit and frowned. His own meals consisted mainly of protein bars and vitamin supplements, hardly appropriate for a growing Draknari youngling. But there was a small container of real fruit he had been saving for a special occasion. How about some fruit? Marcus offered. Zara's eyes lit up, and she nodded eagerly. Marcus opened the container and offered her a piece of apple. She took it delicately in her clawed hands and bit into it, her expression transforming into one of pure bliss. Good, Marcus asked, amused despite the circumstances. Very good, Zara confirmed around a mouthful of fruit. Mama used to get fruits from the traders. Sweet ones like this. As she ate, Marcus studied her more carefully. Beyond the obvious signs of hunger and exhaustion, he could see evidence of rough treatment. There were faint marks around her wrists that looked like restraint burns, and she favored her left side as if her ribs were bruised. Zara, Marcus said gently, were you hurt when the bad men took your family? The youngling paused in her eating and nodded slowly. They had shock sticks. Hurt when I tried to fight. She looked up at him with those two wise eyes. I'm not a very good fighter yet. Mama said I would learn when I was older. Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily. The idea of anyone using pain compliance devices on a child made his military training kick into high gear. Somewhere out there, slavers were operating with impunity, and they had hurt this innocent little one. You're safe now, Marcus told her, though he wondered if he was making promises he couldn't keep. Zara finished the fruit and curled up on Marcus's bunk without being asked. Within minutes, she was asleep, her small body finally relaxing for the first time in who knew how long. Her breathing was deep and even punctuated by small snuffles that reminded Marcus painfully of his daughter's sleeping sounds. Marcus settled into his one chair and watched over her, his mind racing. He couldn't just keep a Draknari youngling in his quarters indefinitely. Station security would eventually find her, and then what? Would they return her to the Draknari worlds? Would they turn her over to the authorities for processing as a refugee? Or worse, would corrupt officials hand her back to the slavers who had taken her family? The Draknari homeworld was still technically in hegemony space, though the peace accords allowed for limited contact. But getting Zara there would require resources Marcus didn't have, and permissions he could never obtain as a dishonorably discharged veteran living in the station slums. As he watched the small dragon sleep, Marcus found himself thinking about choices and second chances. He had failed his own family when it mattered most, arriving home just hours too late to save them from the raiders who had destroyed his colony. He had carried that guilt through the rest of the war, making increasingly reckless decisions that had eventually led to his court-martial and discharge. But here was another chance. Another child who needed protection. Maybe he couldn't undo his past failures, but perhaps he could prevent creating a new one. Zara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in what Marcus assumed was her native language. Her disguise flickered on, and off as she dreamed, golden hair shifting to scales and back again. Even unconscious, part of her mind was focused on survival. Marcus made a decision. He would find a way to help her, no matter what it cost him. The little dragon had called out for someone to be her mommy, and while he certainly couldn't fill that role, he could at least make sure she lived long enough to find safety. Outside his quarters, the station continued its eternal rotation, carrying diplomats and traders and refugees through the void between stars. But in this small room, a broken soldier kept watch over a lost child, both of them carrying wounds that might never fully heal. Tomorrow, Marcus would start asking questions and calling in favors he wasn't sure he still had. Tonight, he would simply be present for a frightened youngling who had already lost too much. As the station's artificial night cycle deepened, Zara's sleep grew more peaceful. Whatever nightmares had been chasing her seemed to retreat in the face of simple human kindness and a full belly. For the first time in days, she was safe. Marcus dozed fitfully in his chair, one ear always listening for any sound that might indicate danger. Old habits, honed by years of war and loss, kept him alert even in sleep. Neither of them knew that their simple act of trust, predator and prey species choosing to care for each other, was about to set in motion events that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the bonds between different forms of life. Marcus woke to the sound of quiet sobbing. The station's morning cycle had begun, bringing artificial sunlight through the small viewport in his quarters. Zara sat on the edge of his bunk, her small shoulders shaking as tears ran down her scaled cheeks. "Hey," Marcus said softly, moving from his chair to sit beside her. "Bad dreams." Zara nodded without looking at him. "I dreamed Mama was calling for me, but I couldn't find her." She sounded so scared. Her voice cracked on the last word. Marcus felt the familiar ache in his chest that came with being around grieving children. He had worked with too many war orphans during the conflict, and the pain never got easier to witness. "Tell me about your mama," Marcus suggested. "What was she like?" Zara's expression brightened slightly. "She was beautiful. Her scales were silver and blue, like moonlight on water. And she sang to me every night before sleep. Dragon songs that told stories of the old times, when our people first learned to fly between stars." "She sounds wonderful," Marcus said honestly. "Papa was strong," Zara continued, warming to the subject. "He could carry me on his back when he flew high above the clouds. He taught me about the different star patterns and how to navigate by them. He said someday I would be old enough to pilot my own ship." The past tense wasn't lost on Marcus. This little one had already accepted that her parents were gone, showing a resilience that spoke to the harsh realities of life on the frontier. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked. Zara nodded, and Marcus prepared the last of his fruit for her. As she ate, he studied the communication unit in his quarters. It was an old model, barely capable of local station calls, but it might be enough for what he needed to do. "Zara, I need to make some calls to try to help you. People who might know how to get you somewhere safe. Will you be okay if I step outside for a few minutes?" Fear flashed in her green eyes. "Don't leave me alone." The panic in her voice told Marcus everything he needed to know about what she had endured in the days since her capture. Being abandoned was probably her greatest fear right now. "Okay," Marcus said calmly. "I won't leave you. But I need to use the communication terminal in the common area down the hall. You can come with me, but you'll need to use your disguise." Zara nodded and shifted to her human form. The transformation still amazed Marcus. One moment a small dragon, the next would appear to be a perfectly normal human child. Only someone who knew what to look for would notice the subtle signs. The way her eyes seemed to glow in a certain light, the slightly pointed ears, the fact that her body temperature ran higher than human normal. They made their way to the common area, where a battered communication terminal served the residents of this section. Marcus fed credits into the machine and began the process of contacting people from his past. The first call went to Sarah Martinez, his former squad medic who now worked at a refugee assistance center on Kepler Station's upper levels. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, older than Marcus remembered, but with the same kind eyes. "Marcus? I haven't seen you in months. How are you doing down there?" Her concern was genuine, which made what Marcus had to ask even harder. "I am okay, Sarah. Listen, I need a favor. A big one." Marcus glanced at Zara, who was staying carefully out of camera range. "I've got a situation involving a Draknari youngling, orphaned, probably by slavers. I need to know what the legal options are for getting her to safety." Sarah's expression grew serious. "Marcus, please tell me you're not harboring an undocumented alien in the lower decks." "I'm not confirming anything," Marcus said carefully. "But, hypothetically, what would happen if someone found a Draknari child who needed help?" Sarah sighed. "Hypothetically, station security would take custody immediately. There would be an investigation. Paperwork filed with both human and Draknari authorities, and the child would be held in protective custody pending placement. The process could take months, and given current tensions between some human factions and the Draknari worlds, she didn't need to finish. Marcus knew that protective custody could easily become something less protective if the wrong people got involved. "Is there another way?" Marcus asked. There might be, Sarah said slowly, but it would require trust and probably some rule bending that could get everyone involved in serious trouble. I'm listening. Dr. Elizabeth Chun runs an off-books network helping alien refugees. She's not related to you, is she? Marcus shook his head. Common name. Dr. Chun has connections throughout the galaxy, including some with the Draknari resistance movement. If anyone could arrange safe passage for a youngling, it would be her. But Marcus, her services come at a cost, and I'm not talking about money. What kind of cost? Sarah hesitated. The kind where you might have to leave everything behind and start over somewhere new. Her network operates in the shadows for good reason. Marcus considered this. His current life wasn't much to give up. A tiny room, a job sorting garbage, and the daily struggle to forget his failures. But helping Zara might mean burning the few bridges he had left and living as a fugitive. How do I contact this Dr. Chun? Marcus asked. Sarah looked around nervously, then leaned closer to her camera. Level 47, Section C, Medical Bay 3. She runs a legitimate clinic there, but asks for treatment for stellar displacement syndrome. That's the code phrase. Marcus, be careful. Once you go down this path, there's no going back. The call ended, and Marcus stared at the blank screen for a moment. Level 47 was in the middle sections of the station, where legitimate businesses operated under the watchful eye of security. Getting there with Zara would mean taking public transport and walking through areas with surveillance cameras and patrols. What do the nice ladies say? Zara asked, still maintaining her human disguise. She gave me the name of someone who might be able to help you get home, Marcus said. But it might be dangerous. Zara considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. More dangerous than staying here? Marcus thought about the slavers who were probably still looking for her, the station security forces who would process her through a system that didn't always protect the innocent, and the various criminal elements that operated in the lower decks. No, he admitted, probably not. They returned to his quarters to plan. Marcus had some civilian clothes that might help him blend in on the upper levels, and Zara's human disguise was convincing enough to pass casual inspection. The main challenge would be getting through the transport checkpoints without proper identification for her. Can you maintain your human appearance for several hours? Marcus asked. Zara nodded. Mama taught me to hold it for a whole day if I had to. It gets tired, but I can do it. Marcus pulled out his small savings cash and counted the credits. Barely enough for transport to level 47 and back, with nothing left over for bribes or emergency expenses. If this went wrong, they would be stranded in an area where neither of them belonged. As they prepared to leave, Marcus's door chimed. He froze, gesturing for Zara to get behind the bunk and stay quiet. Through the small viewport, he could see two figures in station security uniforms standing in the corridor. Mr. Chun. The voice was professional, but carried an undertone of authority that made Marcus's military instincts kick in. This is station security. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Marcus opened the door partway, keeping his body positioned to block the view into his quarters. Officers, what can I do for you? The lead security officer was a tall woman with the bearing of someone used to command. Her partner was younger, probably new to the job based on the way he kept looking around nervously. We're investigating reports of unusual activity in this section, the senior officer said. Specifically, reports of a non-human child seen in the area yesterday. Marcus kept his expression neutral. I haven't seen any non-human children, Officer Valdez. Officer Valdez. She studied Marcus's face carefully. Mr. Chun, you're a military veteran, correct? Served in the war against the hegemony. I did. Marcus wondered where this was leading. Then, you understand the importance of following proper protocols when it comes to potential security threats. A Draknari youngling represents significant diplomatic complications if not handled through appropriate channels. The fact that she knew the species told Marcus that this wasn't a random investigation. Someone had provided specific information. Of course, Marcus said. If I see anything unusual, I'll report it immediately. Officer Valdez nodded slowly. We'll be conducting a more thorough search of this section over the next few days. I trust we can count on your cooperation. Absolutely. After the officers left, Marcus closed the door and leaned against it. They had maybe hours before the search reached his quarters, and hiding Zara here was no longer an option. We have to go now, Marcus told her. Zara emerged from behind the bunk, fear evident in her large eyes. The police are looking for me? Security officers. And, yes, they know you're here somewhere. Marcus grabbed his jacket and the few credits he had. We need to get to that doctor before they find us. As they prepared to leave, Zara suddenly grabbed Marcus's hand. Her small fingers were warm and surprisingly strong. What if the doctor can't help? She asked. What if nobody wants to help a dragon? Marcus knelt down, so he was at her eye level. Then, we'll figure something else out. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. That's a promise. Even though I'm not your little girl. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. For a moment, he saw not a young dragon, but his own daughter, asking why Daddy couldn't protect her from the bad men who had come to their colony. You're someone's little girl, Marcus said quietly. And that makes you important. Your mama and Papa loved you enough to teach you how to survive, and that love doesn't just disappear because they're gone. It lives on in you. Zara's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely. Mama said love was the strongest magic dragons could do. Your mama was a smart woman. They left the quarters together, two unlikely allies venturing into the uncertain corridors of the space station. Marcus's military training kept him alert for potential threats, while Zara's shape-shifting ability provided the perfect disguise. To any casual observer, they looked like a father taking his daughter on an errand. The transport system was busier than Marcus had expected, filled with morning commuters heading to various jobs throughout the station. They found seats near the back of the car, and Zara pressed close to Marcus's side, her disguise holding steady despite what must have been considerable stress. As the transport climbed through the station's levels, Marcus watched the other passengers. Most were humans, with a sprinkling of other species that had diplomatic or trade relationships with humanity. The diversity was a reminder of how much the galaxy had changed since the end of the war. Level 47 was a different world from the lower decks. Clean corridors, functioning lighting, and the quiet hum of legitimate business activity. Marcus felt exposed here, aware that his worn clothing and military bearing marked him as someone who didn't belong. Medical Bay 3 was located in a section devoted to private healthcare services. The waiting area was comfortable, but not luxurious, filled with beings from various species seeking treatment for everything from routine ailments to exotic conditions that only developed during long-term space travel. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a human woman with kind eyes looked up from her work. I'd like to see Dr. Chun, Marcus said. I think I might have stellar displacement syndrome. The receptionist's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Of course, Dr. Chun can see you right away. Please follow me. They were led through a maze of treatment rooms to a private office at the back of the clinic. Dr. Elizabeth Chun was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and hands that spoke of years spent in careful medical work. When she saw Zara, her expression shifted to one of understanding and concern. Close the door, please, Dr. Chun said quietly. And you can drop the disguise, little one. You're safe here. Zara looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. The transformation was like watching a flower bloom as her true draconic form emerged, scales catching the light, and tail curling nervously around her small body. Dr. Chin's expression softened as she took in Zara's obvious signs of malnutrition and stress. What's your name, sweetheart? Zara, the youngling replied in a small voice. That's a beautiful name. Zara, I'm going to help you get somewhere safe, but first I need to check to make sure you're not hurt. Is that okay? As Dr. Chun began a gentle examination, Marcus found himself watching the door and thinking about Officer Valdez's warning about a thorough search. Time was running out, and whatever Dr. Chin's solution was, it would have to be implemented quickly. The examination revealed what Marcus had suspected, evidence of restraint injuries, malnutrition, and the psychological trauma of recent violence. But nothing that proper care couldn't heal, given time and safety. She's resilient, Dr. Chen told Marcus quietly as Zara dozed on the examination table, exhausted by the stress of maintaining her disguise. But she needs specialized care that only her own people can provide. The question is how to get her to them without alerting the authorities. Sarah Martinez said you might have connections. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Edo. But the path I'm thinking of would require you to come too. Once we start this process, there's no going back to your old life. Are you prepared for that? Marcus looked at the sleeping dragon child, so small and vulnerable despite her alien nature. In sleep, her face held the same peaceful expression his own daughter used to have during afternoon naps. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. What do we need to do? Dr. Chen's plan was audacious in its simplicity. A medical transport ship called the Asclepius was scheduled to depart Kepler, 7 in 18 hours, carrying supplies and volunteer medical personnel to refugee camps in the outer systems. The ship's captain, Dr. Chen explained, was part of her network and wouldn't ask inconvenient questions about additional passengers who might need to disappear from official records. The challenge, Dr. Chen said as Zara continued to sleep on the examination table, is getting you both aboard without triggering security protocols. Medical transports are subject to lighter inspection than commercial vessels, but they still check passenger manifests against station records. Marcus studied the data pad she had given him, which contained basic information about their destination. Sanctuary Station was officially designated as a humanitarian aid depot, but Marcus's military experience told him it was something more. The location was too strategic, too well-defended for a simple refugee processing center. What's really its sanctuary? Marcus asked. Dr. Chun met his gaze steadily. A place where people who've fallen through the cracks of the galactic community can start over. New identities, new lives, new purposes. But also a staging area for operations that the legitimate governments can't officially sanction. Operations like returning kidnapped alien children to their families. Among other things, Dr. Chin moved to check on Zara, gently adjusting the blanket around the sleeping youngling. The galaxy is a big place, Mr. Chun. There are still slavers operating beyond the reach of law enforcement, still corruption and injustice in places where the treaties don't have teeth. Sometimes good people have to work outside the system to make things right. Marcus understood. During the war, he had participated in his share of off-books operations, rescuing prisoners from sites that officially didn't exist, protecting civilians in zones where military intervention was politically impossible. The work had been necessary, but it had also contributed to the moral compromises that eventually led to his downfall. If we do this, Marcus said, what happens to Zara? How do we know she'll actually make it back to her people? Because I've reunited 17 other Draknari children with their families over the past 3 years, Dr. Chen replied quietly. The network has contacts within the Draknari resistance movement. They've been working to track down younglings taken by slavers and arrange safe return routes. 17. The number hit Marcus harder than he had expected. 17 families torn apart by greed and cruelty, but also 17 stories that had ended in reunion rather than tragedy. A soft chime from Dr. Chen's communication system interrupted his thoughts. She checked the display and frowned. Station security is conducting random inspections of medical facilities, she said. They'll be here within the hour. Zara stirred at the sound of their voices, her eyes opening with the instant alertness of someone who had learned that sleep was a luxury. Are the bad men coming? Not the same bad men, Marcus said, moving to her side. But we need to go soon. Dr. Chun was already moving with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. From a hidden panel in her office wall, she produced medical scrubs in Marcus's size and a small patient gown that would fit Zara. The quickest way to move through the station without attracting attention is to look like you belong, she explained. Medical personnel have access to service corridors that bypass most security checkpoints. As Marcus changed into the scrubs, Dr. Chun prepared what looked like a standard medical transport pod, a sealed unit designed for moving patients who required isolation or life support during transit. But this one had been modified with a hidden compartment large enough for a small person to hide. "It's not comfortable," Dr. Chun warned as she showed the compartment to Zura, "but it's completely shielded from security scans. You'll be able to breathe, but you'll need to stay very quiet." Zara studied the compartment with the serious expression she seemed to reserve for life or death decisions. "Like hide and seek?" "Exactly like hide and seek," Dr. Chun confirmed. "Except the game lasts until we get to the ship." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chun handed Marcus a medical datapad and an identity badge. "You're Dr. Marcus Walsh, a trauma specialist being transferred to Sanctuary Station. The credentials will hold up under casual inspection, but don't let anyone run a deep background check." The transformation from discharged veteran to medical professional felt strange. Marcus caught sight of himself in a mirror and was surprised at how different he looked. The scrubs gave him an air of authority he hadn't felt in years. They made their way through the medical facility's service corridors, Dr. Chun leading while Marcus pushed the transport pod containing their precious cargo. The corridors were busier than Marcus had expected, filled with staff members going about their daily routines. To his relief, no one gave them a second glance. The route to the docking bays required them to pass through 2 security checkpoints. At each one, Dr. Chen's credentials and Marcus's temporary identity held up under scrutiny. The guards were more interested in checking the transport pod's medical monitoring systems than looking too closely at its occupants. As they moved through the station's mid-levels, Marcus found himself thinking about the path that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been just another broken veteran trying to drink away his memories in the station's lower deck bars. Now he was risking everything to save a child who belonged to a species he had once fought against. The irony wasn't lost on him. During the war, Draknari warriors had been among the most feared opponents human forces faced. Their natural flight capabilities, shape-shifting abilities, and fierce loyalty to their clans had made them formidable enemies. Marcus had personally been involved in operations against Draknari military installations. But war was one thing, and a frightened child was another entirely. The little dragon, sleeping in the transport pod, wasn't responsible for the actions of Draknari military commanders any more than Marcus was responsible for every decision made by human leadership during the conflict. They reached the docking bay without incident. The Asclepius was a mid-sized vessel with the clean, functional lines of a ship designed for humanitarian work rather than speed or luxury. Medical staff were loading supplies under the supervision of the ship's crew, and the controlled chaos of departure preparations provided perfect cover for their arrival. Captain Sarah Okafor met them at the ship's medical bay. She was a woman in her 40s with the kind of weathered competence that came from years of flying relief missions to dangerous places. When Dr. Chun introduced Marcus and explained their situation, Captain Okafor simply nodded. "We have a private cabin available," she said. "Medical bay adjacent, in case your young patient needs special care during the journey." The cabin was small but well-appointed, with a fold-down bunk and basic facilities. More importantly, it was located in a section of the ship where passengers were expected to remain during transit, away from the crew areas where uncomfortable questions might be asked. Once they were safely aboard, Zara emerged from the transport pod like a small dragon butterfly from its cocoon. Her disguise had held throughout the journey, but now she allowed her true form to reassert itself. The relief on her scaled features was palpable. "How long until we get to the safe place?" she asked. 3 days, Marcus replied. "But we should be able to relax a little now." As the Asclepius began its departure procedures, Marcus watched through the cabin's viewport as Kepler 7 fell away behind them. He was leaving behind the only life he had known since his discharge, meager as it had been, for an uncertain future in the outer systems. Zara curled up on the cabin's bunk, her tail wrapping around herself in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as a comfort gesture. "Will you stay with me until we get to the dragon place?" she asked. "Of course," Marcus promised. Good. Her eyes began to drift closed. I don't like being alone anymore. As Zara slept, Marcus found himself thinking about family and belonging. This little dragon had lost everything, but was still capable of trust, still able to accept kindness from a member of a species her people had fought against. There was a lesson in that, though Marcus wasn't sure he was wise enough to fully understand it yet. The ship's intercom crackled to life. Attention passengers and crew, this is Captain Okafor. We are now clear of Kepler 7's traffic control zone and beginning our journey to the outer systems. Estimated travel time to our destination is 72 hours. Medical staff should report to Dr. Yates for duty assignments. Marcus realized he should probably check in with the ship's medical team to maintain his cover. He left Zara sleeping and made his way to the medical bay, where he found Dr. James Yates, a tired-looking man with kind eyes who seemed genuinely pleased to have another trauma specialist aboard. Dr. Walsh, I'm glad Shin could spare you for this run. We're carrying some refugees who've been through rough experiences. Having someone with your background will be invaluable. Marcus felt a pang of guilt at the deception, but also a strange sense of familiarity. Helping injured people, providing comfort to those who had lost everything. These were things he had done during his military service before everything went wrong. Over the next few hours, Marcus found himself genuinely useful in the medical bay. His military first aid training translated well to civilian humanitarian work, and he discovered he had a knack for talking to traumatized refugees in a way that helped them open up about their experiences. There was a Talarian family fleeing religious persecution on their homeworld, an elderly Vaxian whose entire village had been destroyed by a corporate mining operation, and several humans who had been displaced by various conflicts in the frontier regions. Each had their own story of loss and displacement, but also of hope for something better. When his shift ended, Marcus returned to the cabin to find Zara awake and looking out the viewport at the stars. Her dragon form was fully manifest now, scales catching the light from the ship's corridor illumination. Are there dragons among those stars? She asked, pointing to a cluster of bright points in the distance. I think so, Marcus replied. Dr. Chun said there are people at our destination who know how to find your family's world. What they don't want you back? The question was asked in a small voice that broke Marcus's heart. Why wouldn't they want you back? Because I couldn't save Mama and Papa? Because I ran away instead of fighting. Zara's tail lashed with distress. Maybe they'll think I'm a coward. Marcus sat on the edge of the bunk and gently touched her shoulder. Zara, what you did wasn't cowardly. It was smart. Your mama told you to run if the bad men came, right? She nodded. Then, you did exactly what she wanted you to do. You survived. And surviving when everything is trying to hurt you, that takes more courage than fighting. Really, I've been a soldier, and I've seen a lot of brave people. But the bravest ones I knew were the ones who found ways to keep going even when they were scared. Zara considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Were you scared during the war? Terrified, Marcus admitted. Almost every day. But you kept fighting anyway? I did. And you kept surviving anyway, which is just as important. As the ship continued its journey toward the outer systems, Marcus and Zara settled into a routine. During the day, Marcus worked in the medical bay while Zara explored the ship's safe areas, always maintaining her human disguise around other passengers. In the evenings, they would share meals in their cabin, and Zara would tell Marcus stories about her homeworld. She painted pictures with her words of crystal caverns where young dragons learned to fly, of great libraries carved into mountain faces where the histories of 1,000 worlds were preserved, of festivals where entire families would take to the skies in complex aerial dances that had been passed down for generations. In return, Marcus found himself talking about his own daughter, sharing memories he had kept locked away since her death. He told Zara about teaching his little girl to ride a bicycle, about bedtime stories and scraped knees, and the way she used to fall asleep holding his hand. She sounds like she was very loved, Zara said after one of these stories. She was. Very much. I think she would like me. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. I think she would too. On the third day of their journey, Captain Okafor announced their approach to Sanctuary Station. Through the viewport, Marcus could see their destination taking shape. Not the simple refugee depot he had expected, but a massive structure that looked like it could house hundreds of thousands of beings. It's bigger than I thought it would be, Zara observed. Much bigger, Marcus agreed. As the Asclepius maneuvered toward docking, Dr. Chun appeared at their cabin door. She had been keeping a low profile during the journey, but now her expression carried a mixture of excitement and concern. I've been in contact with my people at Sanctuary, she said. There's good news and complicated news. Good news first, Marcus requested. The Draknari resistance has a ship en route to Sanctuary. If everything goes according to plan, Zara could be on her way home within a week. Zara's eyes lit up with hope, but Marcus caught the hesitation in Dr. Chen's voice. And the complicated news? Station security at Kepler 7 has issued a bulletin about a missing Draknari youngling. They're offering a substantial reward for information leading to her recovery. That bulletin has reached some unsavory people who might be heading this way. Marcus felt his protective instincts flare. How much time do we have? Unknown. But Sanctuary has protocols for this kind of situation. Once we dock, you and Zara will be moved to a secure facility until the Draknari ship arrives. As their ship settled into Sanctuary Station's docking bay, Marcus looked at Zara, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of going home. She had been through so much, lost so much, but she had never lost hope. That kind of resilience was something Marcus could learn from. Ready for the next adventure? Marcus asked her. Zara shifted to her human disguise and took his hand with complete trust. Ready. Together, they stepped off the Asclepius and into a new chapter of their unlikely partnership, both of them changed by their journey in ways they were only beginning to understand. Sanctuary Station was a city unto itself, its corridors buzzing with activity from dozens of species, all moving with the purposeful urgency of beings engaged in work that mattered. As Dr. Chun led them through the docking bay, Marcus noted the subtle but unmistakable signs of a military operation disguised as a humanitarian effort. Guard positions that weren't quite civilian, sensor arrays that were too sophisticated for a refugee center, and the way certain areas were clearly restricted despite the open architecture. Their escort was a woman named Commander Torres, whose bearing immediately marked her as former military. She greeted Dr. Chun with the familiarity of old colleagues, then turned her attention to Marcus and Zara with professional assessment. Dr. Chun has briefed me on your situation, Torres said as she led them away from the public areas. We have a secure residential section where you can wait for transport arrangements to be finalized. It should be comfortable, and more importantly, it's completely isolated from station record systems. They passed through what looked like a normal residential corridor, but Marcus noticed the subtle security measures, biometric scanners disguised as decorative panels, reinforced doors that looked standard but were clearly blast-resistant, and the kind of sightlines that would give defenders excellent fields of fire in case of trouble. Their assigned quarters were larger and more comfortable than anything Marcus had experienced in years. 2 bedrooms, a common living area with real furniture, and even a small kitchen stocked with food appropriate for both human and Draknari dietary needs. How did you know what Draknari children eat? Marcus asked Torres. We've had practice, she replied grimly. Zara isn't the first youngling we've helped reunite with her people. The slaver networks have been increasingly targeting Draknari families because of their longevity and special abilities. A single dragon can be worth a fortune on the black market. Zara, who had been maintaining her human disguise, finally allowed her true form to emerge. The relief was evident as her scales caught the light and her tail unfurled from its cramped position. Is it really safe here? She asked Torres directly. As safe as anywhere can be, Torres replied honestly. We have excellent security, and most people here understand that protecting younglings is everyone's responsibility. After Torres left, Marcus and Zara explored their temporary home. The quarters were clearly designed for families, with thoughtful touches that spoke to the experiences of refugees, trauma-resistant surfaces, sound dampening that would muffle nightmares, and communication access that could reach anywhere in the galaxy. That evening, as they shared a meal that actually tasted like real food, Zara asked the question that had been haunting Marcus since their journey began. "When I go home to the Dragon Worlds, will you come with me?" Marcus set down his fork and looked at the small dragon across from him. Over the past week, she had become more than just a responsibility. She had become family in a way that both terrified and comforted him. "I don't think that's possible," Marcus said gently. "I'm human. Your people might not want someone like me in their territory." "But you're my friend," Zara protested. "You saved me. Doesn't that make you part of my family?" The innocent logic hit Marcus harder than any weapon ever had. Family wasn't just about species or blood. It was about the bonds forged through shared experience and mutual protection. "Even if they would accept me," Marcus said, "I'm not sure I belong in a place like that. I've done things during the war, things that your people might not forgive." Zara studied him with those two wise eyes. "Mama always said that what matters isn't what you did yesterday, but what you choose to do today. You chose to help me. That's what I'll tell them." The next morning brought unexpected news. Commander Torres arrived with a woman Marcus didn't recognize, tall, elegant, with the kind of bearing that suggested high rank and significant authority. "This is Ambassador Kellen Starweaver of the Draknari Diplomatic Corps," Torres said. She arrived on the early transport. Marcus felt his military training kick in as he assessed the newcomer. Ambassador Starweaver was clearly Draknari, though she maintained a humanoid form that was almost flawless except for the faint shimmer around her edges and eyes that held depths no human could match. Zara's reaction was immediate and joyful. She ran to the ambassador and began speaking rapidly in her native language, words tumbling over each other in her excitement. Starweaver listened carefully, occasionally asking gentle questions, her expression growing more serious as Zara's story unfolded. Finally, the ambassador switched to standard and addressed Marcus directly. "Youngling Zara tells me you are the one who found her and protected her from further harm." "I did what anyone should do when they find a child in danger," Marcus replied. "Perhaps, but not everyone would have risked their own safety to help a member of a species they once fought against." Starweaver's gaze was penetrating. "She also tells me she considers you family now." Marcus glanced at Zara, who was watching the conversation with intense interest. "She's been through a lot. Sometimes children form attachments to their rescuers that..." Marcus Chun. Starweaver interrupted him, and Marcus realized she had been doing research. Former captain, Earth Defense Force Marine Corps. Decorated veteran of the Proxima Campaign, the Battle of Kepler Prime, and the liberation of New Geneva. Court-martialed for disobeying orders during Operation Stalwart Shield. The recitation of his military record felt like a physical blow. Marcus had hoped his past could remain buried, but apparently Draknari intelligence services were thorough. "The records show you disobeyed a direct order to abandon a civilian evacuation site when enemy forces approached," Starweaver continued. "You chose to stay and defend the evacuation against overwhelming odds, allowing over 300 civilians to escape. Your forces were overrun, and you spent 6 months in a hegemony prison camp before being liberated." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "The court-martial said I acted without authorization and endangered my unit unnecessarily." The court-martial was conducted by politicians who wanted to find fault with anyone who complicated their neat little narratives about the war, Starweaver said bluntly. "Among the civilians you saved were 47 Draknari refugees who had fled their homeworld when the hegemony took control." The revelation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. He had never known the species breakdown of the civilians they had evacuated. In the chaos of battle, people were just people who needed protection. "You have already saved Draknari lives," Starweaver continued, "and now you have saved one of our most precious younglings." That creates certain obligations on both sides. I don't want payment, Marcus said quickly. Payment? Starweaver looked genuinely puzzled. Captain Shun, I am not here to offer payment. I am here to offer citizenship. The words seemed to hang in the air like something physical that Marcus could reach out and touch. Citizenship. A place to belong. A chance to start over. I don't understand. Draknari society recognizes several paths to citizenship, Starweaver explained. Birth, marriage, adoption, and the saving of lives. By our laws, your actions have earned you a place among our people if you choose to accept it. Zara bounced excitedly. You can come home with me. You can really come home. Marcus looked between the ambassador and the small dragon who had changed his life so completely. The offer was generous beyond anything he had hoped for, but it also meant leaving behind everything human he had ever known. What would that mean exactly? Marcus asked. You would be granted full citizenship rights on any Draknari world. A new identity, a clean start, and, most importantly, the protection of our laws and customs. You would also be free to leave at any time if you found our society wasn't compatible with your needs. And Zura will be returned to her extended family on Pyraxis Prime. Her parents. Starweaver's expression grew somber. We have confirmed that her parents were killed resisting their captors. But she has grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who have been searching for her since she disappeared. The pain in Zara's eyes was immediate and profound, but she had already accepted her loss during the long nights on the transport ship. Now she just nodded bravely and wiped her eyes with the back of her scaled hand. They'll love her, Starweaver continued, and they'll love the man who brought her home to them. Over the next several hours, Marcus learned more about Draknari society than he had ever imagined possible. Their worlds were ancient beyond human comprehension, with cities carved in a living rock and cultures that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution and experience. They valued wisdom, loyalty, and the protection of the young above almost all else. Most surprising to Marcus was the revelation that human military tactics and technology were greatly respected among Draknari military circles. His background would actually be seen as an asset rather than a liability. Many of our younger warriors study human combat techniques, Starweaver explained. Your species' adaptability and innovation in the face of overwhelming odds has earned considerable respect. A veteran of your caliber would be welcomed as both citizen and advisor. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself seriously considering the offer. What did he have to return to? A tiny room in the lower decks of a space station, a job sorting garbage, and a life spent trying to forget his failures. Here was a chance to matter again, to use his skills for something positive. That evening, as they prepared for bed in their temporary quarters, Zara curled up next to Marcus on the couch like a small dragon cat seeking comfort. Are you going to come with me to the dragon worlds? She asked sleepily. I'm thinking about it, Marcus admitted. Good. I don't want to say goodbye to you. You're my family now. The simple declaration settled something in Marcus's chest that had been twisted and painful for years. Family wasn't just about blood or species. It was about choosing to care for each other despite differences and difficulties. 3 days later, the Draknari ship's stellar song arrived at Sanctuary Station. Marcus had never seen anything like it, a vessel that looked more grown than built, with flowing organic lines that suggested both incredible speed and artistic beauty. Watching it dock was like watching a piece of living art come to rest. The ship's captain was an imposing Draknari named Corvin Stormwing, whose natural form was magnificent even by dragon standards. His scales held every shade of blue from deep navy to brilliant sky, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in 3 dimensions. So, Stormwing said after being briefed on their situation, this is the human who saved our youngling. Marcus stood at attention, old military habits asserting themselves in the presence of what was clearly a ranking officer of another military force. At ease, Captain, Stormwing said with what might have been amusement. We are allies now. or soon will be if you accept Ambassador Starweaver's offer. The offer is very generous, Marcus said carefully. It is also well-deserved. But I understand the difficulty of choosing to leave one's birth culture behind. It is not a decision to make lightly. As preparations for departure began, Marcus found himself walking the corridors of Sanctuary Station, thinking about choices and consequences. Commander Torres found him in one of the observation lounges, staring out at the stars. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. "Having all the thoughts," Marcus replied. "I've spent the last 5 years trying to forget who I used to be. Now I'm being offered a chance to become someone new entirely." "The galaxy is full of humans who found homes among other species," Torres said. "Some of the best people I know are the ones who figured out that family isn't about DNA. What if I'm not good enough for them? What if I can't live up to their expectations?" Torres smiled. "Captain, you saved a child at considerable risk to yourself, then made sure she got home safely. I think you're already living up to their expectations." The morning of departure arrived with surprising speed. Marcus had packed his few possessions and said goodbye to Dr. Chun and the other staff members who had helped make their escape possible. The network of people working to protect the innocent and reunite families was larger than he had imagined, and he was humbled to have become part of it, even briefly. As they prepared to board the Stellar Song, Zara took his hand with complete trust. She had grown stronger over their time at Sanctuary, her scales brighter and her movements more confident. The frightened refugee had been replaced by a young dragon eager to go home. "Ready for the next adventure?" Marcus asked, echoing the question he had posed when they first left the medical transport. "Ready," Zara replied with a grin that showed small, sharp teeth. "But this time we're going home together." Ambassador Starweaver met them at the ship's boarding ramp. In her hands was a data pad containing Marcus's new citizenship documents and identity records. "Welcome to your new life, Marcus Chun of the Draknari Worlds," she said formally. As they boarded the ship, Marcus caught a glimpse of the crew. Dragons in their natural forms moving with casual efficiency through spaces designed for beings who could fly. The sight was both alien and somehow familiar, like coming home to a place he had never been. The ship's departure was smooth and silent, so different from human vessels with their rumbling engines and vibrating hulls. As Sanctuary Station fell away behind them, Marcus found himself thinking about journeys and destinations, about the difference between running away from something and running toward something else. Zara had claimed a spot next to one of the observation ports, watching the stars whirl past as the ship built up speed toward their destination. Her expression was one of pure joy, and Marcus realized that for the first time since he had found her, she looked like a normal child rather than a traumatized refugee. Captain Stormwing approached them as they settled into the passenger area. "The journey to Pyraxis Prime will take approximately 10 days, he informed them. "I understand this will be your first visit to a Draknari world, Captain Chun." "It will," Marcus confirmed. "Then, you are in for quite an experience. Pyraxis Prime is one of our oldest worlds, where the crystal cities reflect starlight in patterns that have inspired artists for millions of years. Zara's family has prepared quite a celebration for her homecoming. And for you too," Zara added, squeezing Marcus's hand. "Grandmama Silverscale said they want to throw a feast for the brave human who brought me home." Over the following days, Marcus learned more about Draknari culture and customs. The ship's crew took turns teaching him basic phrases in their language, showing him the intricate etiquette of interspecies communication, and explaining the social structures of a civilization that valued wisdom and experience above wealth or power. Most importantly, he learned that his fears about being accepted were largely unfounded. The Draknari crew treated him with respect that seemed to go beyond mere politeness. They genuinely valued his experience and perspective, asking thoughtful questions about human military tactics and showing genuine interest in his stories about the war from a human perspective. "Your people and ours fought as enemies," Captain Stormwing told him one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's common area. "But war's end and warriors recognize courage regardless of which side it serves. What you did for our younglings speaks to the kind of person you are. As they approached Pyraxis Prime, Marcus got his first glimpse of a Draknari world. The planet was smaller than Earth, but impossibly beautiful, its surface covered with crystal formations that caught and reflected the light of its twin stars. Cities appeared to grow from the rock itself, their spires reaching towards space in graceful curves that followed no human architectural principles. Home, Zara breathed, pressing her face against the observation port. Marcus felt a strange flutter in his chest as he looked at the alien world below. For the first time in years, he was looking at a place where he might belong, where his past could be left behind and his future could be whatever he chose to make it. The ship's landing was met by what appeared to be half the population of the local city. Dragons in their natural forms filled the air around the landing pad, their scales catching sunlight in a display that was almost too beautiful to process. On the ground, Draknari in humanoid forms waited with barely contained excitement. As they disembarked, an elderly female dragon approached them with tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. Her colors were silver and blue, like moonlight on water, and Marcus knew immediately that this was Zara's grandmother. The reunion was everything Marcus could have hoped for, and more. Zara was enveloped in wings and love, surrounded by family members who had feared they would never see her again. The joy was infectious, spreading through the crowd until everyone was laughing and crying and celebrating together. But even in the midst of reunion, Zara didn't forget about Marcus. She pulled away from her family long enough to grab his hand and drag him forward. "Grandmama," she said in a voice that carried clearly across the landing field. "This is Marcus. He's my human daddy now." The declaration sent a ripple of surprise through the crowd, but Grandmama Silverscale simply studied Marcus with ancient, wise eyes. Then she smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face. "Then he is our family too," she said simply. Later, at the celebration feast that seemed to include most of the city, Marcus found himself seated at a place of honor next to Zara's family. The food was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and the stories shared around the table painted pictures of a civilization rich in tradition and wisdom. As the evening wore on, Zara fell asleep in her grandmother's arms, finally able to rest completely for the first time since her ordeal began. Looking at her peaceful face, Marcus felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. "She calls you her human daddy," Grandmama Silverscale observed quietly. "She's been through a lot," Marcus replied. "Sometimes children form attachments, sometimes," the elderly dragon interrupted gently. "Children see truths that adults miss. You saved our precious one, but more than that, you gave her the gift of knowing she was loved and protected when everything else had been taken from her." Marcus looked around the table at the faces of Zara's extended family. Dragons who had welcomed him without reservation, who had made space for him at their table and in their lives. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," said Grandmama Silverscale with a smile that held the wisdom of ages, "you help us raise her. You tell her stories about the galaxy beyond our world. You teach her about the bravery and adaptability of humans. And you let her teach you about the magic that happens when different kinds of people choose to become family." As the celebration continued around them, Marcus watched Zara sleep in the arms of her grandmother, surrounded by love and safety and the promise of a future filled with possibility. The little dragon who had run to him calling for mommy had found her way home, and somehow, so had he. Outside the great hall, the twin stars of Pyraxis Prime set in a blaze of color that painted the crystal cities in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, dragons soared through the evening sky, their forms silhouetted against the stars like living constellations. For the first time in years, Marcus Chun looked toward tomorrow with hope instead of dread. He had found his purpose again, his place in the universe, and a family that valued him not for what he had been, but for what he chose to become. The little dragon had needed someone to save her, but in the end, she had saved him too. And that, Marcus thought as he watched the stars emerge in the alien sky, was the most human story of all. The transformative power of choosing to protect and love those who needed it most, regardless of the differences that might seem to divide them.